Hey guys, Dexter here. Today I'm gonna be talking about the updated 4.7b range DPS tier list. I will be going over the units quickly, but not really much over the units that stay unchanged basically since the last version. So I will be talking mostly about new units that wreck meta right now basically. Starting in S tier, we have Tribeshunter, which turned into Alphamale. It is a super good starting unit. It can solo 1 to 5 and champ most of it besides 3, but it can champ 1, 2, 4, 5. And you can push a lot if you start out with these. So really good option right now. Next up we have Druids. One of the better starts right now. 6 Druids. The reason being it has 2 upgrade paths. One is a melee variant, the Swordmage. It is extremely good in early game. The other upgrade would be Ascendant. It deals ranged magic DPS and has a minus armor debuff. And it's really strong, both versions. But the Swordmage is in early game as a solo unit way better. Next up we have Sprite, which turns into Thunderbird. They are super dominant early game, just like the other two. Simply because they can also solo 1 to 4 and push while they're at it. The only problem is wave 5 and 8, because magic damage just melts heavy armor, you know that. But besides that, it's a really good DPS unit, and if you pair it with minus armor, it actually is pretty decent versus 10. Next up, I'm gonna quickly talk about Meliai. She hasn't changed, but due to new units being very tanky, you can actually implement her way better now, like into your game. And if you combine them with Tribeshunter or Alphamales, they're super good versus 10, and just in general. You can just spam these out way more safe now, because you got some units that buffer a lot of early game waves by their own basically, which don't require much upgrades besides themselves. So next up we have Wyvern, which turns into Windrider. It shines most in the mid game when you got a lot of income and an already existing army. The reason being, it is the best single target concentrated DPS there is. If you got 30 of these, they're gonna stack into each other, unlike the prisoner Mavericks. They're gonna push each other away, but the Windrider is just gonna sit in one big unit clump, and their DPS is insane if you got a lot of these, especially versus 20 and 20 plus. Their DPS is really good. Next up we have Acolyte, which turns into Revenant. It got buffed, it got cheaper, it got more range, it got more DPS. It's a viable early game DPS unit now. You can start with these and maybe save an aura or something. They're not that bad, especially since they now destroy 4 if you add tanks to your mix. Next up we have Proton, which turned into Adept. They are surprisingly good now. They got a bit of a range buff and a bit of a cost increase. The upgraded version is just 120 gold now. It was 155, which was way too much. They are really good as a start if you come across a build that couldn't maybe hold other auras like regeneration or a helicopter on wave 1. So this is where they're really good at, saving multiple auras on wave 1 and just spamming these and holding 1 and 2 basically for free, while already having saved up some auras. Next up we have Carrion Spitters, which turn into Nightcrawler. You can basically compare them with the Fire Archer because they are so cheap. You can just spam these out so hard. And the upgraded version is just 95 gold. So if you have nothing versus 10, just a pure spam of these guys is gonna destroy it for you easily. Next up we have the regular Priest. It got a gold cost reduction, and it's surprisingly good now, especially in early game. If you're running a tank setup or got some sword mages or something similar, even Thunderbird or Alphamale, you can just spam these out now. They are just 80 gold, the unupgraded version, and all you're gonna have to do with these early game is just gonna spam these out unupgraded and hope for a mana aura later on, because the heal is actually pretty good. And their DPS is not that bad either. I mean, especially for the cost now, since they cost way less now. I think it's 30 gold for the first one and like another 20 for the upgraded version. So they're really worth it now. Next up we have Sentry, which turns into Nightsaber. She got also just a gold cost reduction. Basically everything else stayed the same, but because of that, she is now really good. She can hold 7, she can hold 10. Her DPS is really good. She's maybe a bit unflexible because you can't push as hard, because she requires way more investment than, let's say, Tribeshunter, especially in early game. But besides that, it can actually hold 7 and 10 now, so that's really good. The dragons actually move from S to A tier because I think they're way too unflexible now. If you have any of these guys, basically they're blowing these two out the water in terms of push too. Because it's gonna need a lot of investment just to hold level 4 and 5, I would say, which these guys just they wreck passively basically. But these guys are gonna need like 600 plus upgrades just because 3 and 4 is coming up. So because of their unflexibility in early game, I would say they aren't that good anymore, honestly. I mean in mid to late game as a spam unit of course, but as a starter, I wouldn't suggest so. If you got other options like Tribeshunter or Sprites, they're just blowing these two out the water because they cover more waves and they don't need as much upgrades. The next change thing would be Leviathan, which turns into Tempest. It got buffed and gold cost reduction, but it wasn't enough sadly. It's still pretty bad. Same thing for Machine Turret. Nightsaber just blow these out the water. They're also more food. Something about them, I mean, their stats are almost the same, but I don't know why Sentries and Nightsabers perform so much better than the machine turrets. I don't know, because their stats are basically the same. Next up we have Mercurial. It also got cheaper, a bit damage buffed, but the damage is still really bad compared to other top tier units basically. Next up we have Catapult. It got an attack speed buff, a bit of damage buff, and that's about it. The problem is it didn't change too much in the unit standing. You can maybe spam these out for 17, but then after that you're gonna have dead value basically, because the next siege wave is gonna be 28 and these guys are not doing anything versus 28, they're way too weak. Next up we have Dark Priest, which turns into Meridian. Yeah, they're still very, very expensive and their DPS is also pretty subpar. The only good thing they have is basically the slow, which goes up to 70% I think. The slow is really good, don't get me wrong, but their DPS is just bad. Especially for like that high cost of the complete unit. So next up we have Debuff tier. I'm just gonna quickly say that the minus armor stacks with each other from all sources. So not from the same unit, but from different ones. What that means is versus champions, they're gonna melt, honestly. If you have stacked minus armor on the champion, that's so much damage increase. You should really look out for minus armors and stack them with each other. But of course also slow is really important, especially if you don't have a polar bear or anything like that, or a tree of time. So having multiple of any of these guys is gonna benefit your army a lot, and you should always look out for these. And over in bad, Necromancer got buffed. It's still bad though, because it has still cooldown of 60 seconds. Should be 30 seconds, so it can recast at one point, but it can't. The ghost, of course, is overpowered. I'm not saying that it's not, but the Necromancer and Necrolyte, the summoners, are actually terrible. Next up we have, last but not least, we have Watcher, which turns into Violet. It got buffed, but it's nowhere near enough. It's still super bad. And thanks for listening, guys. I'll see you in the next one.